Hey guys, Mr. V over here doing a book review today for Napoleon: A Life by Andrew Roberts. This is a book about Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a general at a very young age, played a very big role in the French Revolution, and then became the Emperor of France after the French Revolution. And this just discusses his whole life from a very young age through his death, and they show the craziness that his reign had during and after the French Revolution. Now, before you guys read this book, there's a few things you should know. Something that's very important is that this is a very, very dense book. While it is very long, you can see it is 800 pages of actual text, but while it is very long, there is a lot of information on every page, and it's just very dense. I have read longer books and been able to read it faster just because they were a little easier to absorb. You can check some of the other books I have. Some of those books were longer and easier to absorb, and this one was very long still, but it was just a very dense book, and that's why it took a little longer to read. And yeah, you guys should know also that I read this book after reading a book about the French Revolution, which I also did a review on. But I read this book after doing the French Revolution, so I knew many of the events that led into Napoleon, and I would say it helps knowing the major events because it definitely briefly explains all the major events, but I would say that it's very brief in the book because this book focuses on Napoleon, not the French Revolution. So that's why it's very brief, to where I suggest doing possibly a quick study before you start this. You want to do a quick study on the French Revolution. But if you guys are debating on if you want to read this book, I would recommend reading the introduction because he did an amazing introduction to the book and an amazing introduction to who Napoleon was. And that's why if you're debating, read the introduction because he just did a great introduction. And overall, the book just gives you a nice background on Napoleon, basically through his younger years, through his death, and he just goes and gives you an amazing story on that. And you can just see how well researched this book is because he gives you so many facts, so many great things, so many great stories, and he gives you so much. And he even states when things are unofficial, which is also great. A good example of that is like when he talks about some of the battles, he tells you like the deaths that happen, but he tells you what Napoleon claims, like how many people died. Then he gives you the real numbers, but he also gives you like times that he says it's unknown. So that's always great, but you can just see the amount of research he did, that he shows so many of the different numbers that were given. And that's why it is really cool to see that. But it's also cool to see things like, it's very interesting to see like how Napoleon took over after the French Revolution. And that's why I would say it helps knowing the French Revolution because it's definitely very interesting how Napoleon took over, because he would like fake results to get laws passed. He got like peace treaties with other countries immediately after taking over and becoming the emperor. And he was just, you could see how great he was at negotiations. And the book really covers that. It shows not only how great he was at negotiations with other countries, but how great of leadership he was. He had such an amazing leadership ability. And, you know, you can see how he became emperor because it's just very interesting. Like after the French Revolution, you know, during the French Revolution, they did it because they decided to overthrow the king and get rid of the king. They didn't want that type of leadership anymore. Yet only 11 years later, they give the power for Napoleon to be the emperor. So it just shows his skill in leadership, and the book really covers that well. Like it just shows it very well. It also discusses his battles, and it goes very in-depth about it. I'll cover more about that in a little bit, but he goes very in-depth. He gives an analysis for it, like why things went better or worse. You know, sometimes things could have gotten better or worse because they had started a few days too late type of thing, and then it got colder. You know, there's many reasons, but he gives you a great analysis for those things. And he even, as I said earlier, he even mentions when things are unknown. So that is really good. And it also helps that he's giving you the analysis. He's not just giving you like the facts and figures. He's giving you an analysis, so that helps. And you can just see that war, you know, is not simple because there are many aspects that lead to like why they would win or lose a war. So you can just see how complex war is when you read this book. And that's why I felt it's very interesting reading the analysis. And he even has like maps of some of the battles in there, like, and he has it in the chapters. He also has this like pictures of just like who Napoleon is and like the people that Napoleon had like around him. But he also has like maps and pictures, and he has maps like in the chapter, in the middle of the chapter. So that helps with it. You can actually visualize it and see some of the things that are being discussed. And, you know, that was really helpful. And when reading the book with his analysis, you can see the arrogance Napoleon had in war. And I'd say you almost had to read his analysis for it, because then you could see like why he would make certain decisions, and that sometimes he made bad decisions because of his arrogance, and that would lead to them losing a war. And then the analysis would discuss it. And it was doing that kind of stuff because he showed how Napoleon was amazing at war, but he often like overstated his victories, and he always overstated how many people he killed and understated the amount of people that died from the French side. So you can see he always overstated accomplishment and always had an excuse for why he withdrew. And that's possibly why a lot of people followed him, because they thought he was doing much better than he really was. I mean, I should say, though, he still did amazing. When you read the book, you can see how much he expanded France at one point. But I think people just thought, like, wow, like, very few people are dying type of thing. So, you know, it's definitely interesting reading the analysis in that. And one very nice and interesting feature of this book is how he covers all aspects of Napoleon's life. And he even like shows his love side, like the love he had for his wife, because he has the communication between the two. Like he's writing about some of the letters, and he gives you quotes from those love letters and explains his love and how it impacted Napoleon as a person. And I think that helps a lot too, because those are the things like you never hear about for these type of leaders. You never hear about their love side. And, you know, Napoleon cheated often, so he supposedly loved his wife, but he still had 22 mistresses. But you never read that side of them. And it's interesting seeing like the love side of these type of leaders, because he went into so many, he caused so many wars, which caused so many deaths. So you do think of him as this evil person, but you never hear about like their love side. And that's why it's interesting seeing it, because they have letters that he wrote to the people he loved. So it's just very interesting, because again, you never see that side of them. So that was very interesting about the book. Now, one thing I did not like about this book was that he was very in-depth about the battles, which I said I liked that he gave the analysis, but I felt he was too in-depth about some of these battles, because there's a lot of names and places. Because there's names from both sides. There's a lot of cities named, and there were so many battles that Napoleon went into. And there's so many cities named. There's so many generals from both sides, which is good and bad, because I do want to know them. I don't like when people just skip over that aspect. But it just sometimes got a little confusing, because he went so in depth and the chapters are so long. And you can see in the book, he just went so in depth at times. And that's why it can get a little confusing. Because the battles are necessary, but I felt it was a little too in-depth at times. Like he would say exact dates or the exact miles gained on certain dates and like what certain temperatures were. Now, of course, some of it did factor in, but I don't think all of it factored in that heavily that you needed to know the exact mileage gained on one day. And sometimes it got a little too in-depth, because I enjoyed the book like outside of the battles more of the political aspects and things like that. I still enjoyed the battles and analysis given, but sometimes it did drag a bit just because of how in-depth he went on the battles. But, you know, I still thought this was a very well-written book. He weaves a really good story about the rise and fall of Napoleon and France. You know, you just see what happened, and he keeps you really engaged, because there are very, very long chapters, but he keeps you engaged. Andrew Roberts did a great job of keeping you engaged while you're reading this. But again, I just need to let you know that this is a very dense book. So you just want to be prepared for that, because he gives you a lot of information. So it does take a little longer to read. So you want to go into that knowing it. But when you read this book, you see why Napoleon is still talked about today. You see why he is. And he's still talked about, he's still referenced. And you see like how powerful he became and how powerful in his leadership abilities. You see all that in the book. And you see why he is such a legendary and historical figure. You really see that in the book, and he really shows it to you, to where if you want to read an in-depth biography about Napoleon and you have to be willing to devote the time, then this is a great book for you. But again, you have to be willing to devote the time because it's a very dense book. It's very long, but this is a great book. It's very detailed, so it does drag a little bit at times because it's super in-depth about the battle scenes. But overall, it's just an amazing story of an interesting and legendary historical figure. And the book was just a lot of fun, and it's recommended if you want to read a great book about Napoleon. But if you guys have any comments or questions, please post it in the comment section below because I love to hear your opinions. If you want to see more book reviews like the one you just saw, please click the subscribe button as I always upload multiple different types of book reviews. But thank you for watching my book review today. This is Mr. V. Go enjoy reading.